Hi, I'm josephrlewis, and I write adventures. And my adventures include read-aloud text. Now, read-aloud text is something that a lot of people have thoughts and feelings about. It's been around for a while. Some people use it, some people don't. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about what it is and why I choose to use it the way I do. So first off, what am I saying when I say read-aloud text? And it is literally what it sounds like. It is text that the GM reads aloud to the players at the table. So some people like this, some people value this, some people hate this. Why? Why do we have so many feelings? Well, read aloud text comes to us from the beginning of the hobby, 40 plus years ago, and it takes a couple of different forms. I think a lot of folks have certain feelings about it because in the earlier times, read aloud text was fairly long, fairly verbose, somewhat artistic and flowery, purple prosy, if you will, and it took time to read. It was kind of slow and boring, and it felt a little bit like the adventure writer was trying to be a novel writer in the middle of the adventure. So a lot of folks didn't like that and don't like that to this day. So let's take a look at a few examples of read-aloud text from earlier and today and talk about how they are used and what they're for and why I feel the way I do about read-aloud text. So here we have an example from the village of Hommlet. This is an example of the introductory text, which the GM is meant to read aloud to the players. And as we can see, it is 3 very dense paragraphs. It's at least 300 words, if not more, which is going to take the GM probably anywhere from 1 to 2 solid minutes of just continuous talking to put out there. And of course, all GMs at the beginning of an adventure probably set the scene, and they do a lot of talking on their own. But this is a lot of what the writer thought the tone should be, which is okay, but this is a lot of talking for the GM to do right up front. And if this was to be repeated throughout the adventure every time there was a set piece or a special location, or even for every room, I think we can all see why this would bog things down, be a little bit tiresome, and why people would sort of tune out and start looking at their phones, if they had phones 40 years ago, waiting for their time to actually start playing. So this is where it comes from. This is the beginning of read-aloud text. Very dense, not as helpful as it could be. Good at setting a tone and a feeling, but maybe not the best use of everyone's time at the table. Here we have an example of text from later in that same adventure, Village of Hommlet. These are several room descriptions. And here we can see we do not have read-aloud text. What we have is just text for the GM. It's just a description of what's going on in the room. Now, this sort of swings in the opposite direction from having all that read-aloud text. This is just for the GM. So when the players come to, say, room 9, the littered room, the GM needs to pause and say, okay, one sec, let me see what's in this room. And then I need to read this whole paragraph to myself quietly, because this is not read aloud. And I need to parse, okay, it's empty, it's dirty, there's no signs of the occupant, there's a rat, it used to be a conference room, I don't need that. There's nothing of value here, except there's a sword. It's behind a wall case whose contents are empty. Okay, wait. At first this said the room was empty. Now it says there's a wall case. I don't know if that means a bookcase or something else. But now there's a sword behind a wall case. So that is what's important. It was right at the end. So now I need to get a picture in my head. There's a room. It's mostly empty. There's a rat. There is a wall case, whatever that is, and there's a sword behind it. So now I need to say to my players, okay, there's an empty room, and you see a wall case. And they say, oh, what's in the wall case? And I say, nothing. And then they say, oh, I want to investigate more. And then they find the broadsword. All that took time and energy on my part, the GM's part, to parse this text, get a picture in my head, and then convey something to the players, and then we can start interacting and actually playing. And we can also see here in this example, this text is in no way structured. It's just a paragraph of flat text. So nothing is bolded or italics. There's no bullet points. So I need to read all of it to figure out what's important, structured in my mind. So this is another example of the way text can be presented and the work that it puts on the GM to read and manage that text at the table. Still looking at Village of Hommlet, this is text of a house, one of the first locations that the players will see when they come to the village. And we can see this is a huge paragraph of information. And again, this is not read aloud. So this is something that the GM needs to pause when the players walk up to location number 1 and read all of this text, parse it in some fashion. Again, nothing is called out. The first half is not bolded, and the second half is bolded. So I know that the first half is more upfront information. The second half is more after the fact, stuff that they will find out through exploration and interaction. But again, I need to sit and I need to read all of these lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines of text of dense information, tracking on what these buildings are, what the people are, what the animals are. What is it the players can see when they first walk up? And then I need to say that out loud to my players, hopefully in a useful and interesting manner. And then they'll start asking me questions, and then I need to go back to this text, and I need to find what it is they're asking about and interact with the text and my players back and forth. So I think, again, this is putting a lot of work on the GM at the table to parse the text and be an interesting, moderator of the events. So let's jump forward in time, and we'll take a look at this guy. This is from Lost Mines of Phandelver. This is a more modern, this is a 5e game. And here we have the introductory read-aloud text. And we can see right here in the little description to the GM, it says, read the box text when you're ready to start. So once again, the GM is going to just read this introduction. And again, at the beginning of an adventure, that's not terrible. It's helping to set the scene and set the tone and get everyone started and get everyone to settle in and pay attention to the adventure and start playing together. That's okay. But this style of presenting a lot of text to be read aloud is going to be repeated all throughout the adventure. So are they going to do it in a way that's helpful to the GM or not so helpful? Let's see. So we come to one of the first locations. This is number 3. There's a kennel. So we have a title, it says kennel. Then there's a piece of text which is not read aloud, which says, the Cragmaws keep a kennel. Well, that seems somewhat obvious, where they're keeping wolves. Then I have the read aloud text, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of a fairly wide block of text. It's got to be at least 50 words, if not more. And it's a description of everything that we're seeing and smelling and hearing in this room with the kennels, with the wolves, which is nice for setting the scene. But it's a lot of stuff going on. And then we have more text in paragraph form under that the players, that I, the GM, am going to need to take on board and then parse in order to interact with the players. So once they go into this room, they start interacting with wolves. I need to read out, do the goblins care about the sounds of the wolves? How do the wolves react? And I'm parsing. How do the characters do an animal handling check? I'm parsing. Then we come down at the very bottom, you can see the word fissure is bolded and italicized. It's called out because that's an important feature in the room. Well, what is that referring to? Well, if we look back up in this block of read-aloud text, the word fissure is in there. It's in the third line, the middle of the line. It's not bolded or underlined or anything. So if I was reading this out loud to my players during play, I probably am not paying attention to the word fissure. I'm probably focusing on these wolves. That seems important. But now I'm hoping that the players are going to ask about, hey, what was that fissure you mentioned? I might not remember. I was reading all this stuff. I was trying to keep track of all the wolves because that seemed like it's the most important thing. It hasn't been called out to me, the GM, that the fissure is going to be important. So if I miss down here that the fissure is important, this is an access to another part of the location, of the dungeon. So a lot of information is being presented. It's not highly structured. I'm being given a lot of work as the GM of what to read, but also what I need to parse internally so I can function and interact with my players. So again, I think this is a similar problem of giving the GM a lot of information that's not well structured. So I need to do a lot of thinking and reading and parsing at the table in order to interact with the players and keep the game going. So let's keep jumping forward in time and looking at some more examples. This is from Winter's Daughter, Old School Essentials. And here we have an entirely different presentation of information. It's highly structured. Almost nothing here is written in a complete sentence. So let's see how interactive this is. So I come to a room called the Hall of Hounds, and the first thing I see are high level. I see there are pillars, 2 stone hounds, and double doors. Under that, I have bolded text, so things like the relief carvings, or the hounds are chained. The double doors are massive and stoned. And then under that, I have the parenthetical text, which is not bolded. So I have scenes of holy war, which are on the carvings, which are on the pillars. The chains are at the base of the door, connected to the stone hounds. So I have much more structured information. What I don't have here, though, is something that ties it together in a more coherent way. So when my players walk into the room, once again, I need to read all of this structured text, get a picture in my head, and then figure out how do I present that to my players? What do they see first versus what are they going to discover through exploration and interaction. So this is more helpful in some ways, I think, than the huge wall of text of paragraphs that we saw earlier. But I think it presents a similar challenge because the GM still has to sit with this text, parse it, and then figure out, what do I say now versus what do I say later when they interact. And I think all of those pauses is stressful to a GM. I get anxiety at the table when I'm trying to do a good job and be fun and entertaining and not make a mistake within the text of the adventure. So there are a lot of challenges here. So I think this is an improvement in some ways, but I think it introduces another aspect of the same challenge of the work the GM has to do at the table. Here's our next example. This is from Shadowdark's Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur. This is room number 1. And once again, we see highly structured information, which I think is very good. We have, at the very top, we have information about walls and red pillars. It's a bit more, not quite full sentences, but closer, full clauses maybe. So that's very helpful. And then all the information is called out in greater detail in the bullets below. I love that. But once again, we don't have something that ties it together neatly. So similar to the OSC text, I need to, as the GM at the table, read all of this, decide what I'm going to present up front, what I'm going to have the players discover in secondary fashion, and then what is actually going to come out of my mouth. How am I going to say these words in an interesting manner to try to be engaging? So again, well structured, which is fantastic, I think. I love bullets. I love bolding. Anything that helps the eye to move around the page and figure out how the text is connected and what is important versus what is less important. But I think we can tie this together a little bit with read-aloud text, which is why I use read-aloud text. So let's look at an example of my read-aloud text. I just want to interrupt my own video real quick, wearing a completely different shirt, because it's been brought to my attention since I made this video that the Arcane Library and Kelsey have updated the way they write their adventure text. So we were looking at the Minotaur, that's from an earlier adventure. So take a look at this. This is from Cursed Scrolls 3. This is Hoard of the Seawolf King adventure. You can look right here at this first location, and we have complete sentences that describe the setting and where things are in relation to each other. Kelsey was very clear with me that this is not box text, but this is player-facing text, which I think you pretty much just read to the players like it's read aloud. So I think this is great. It's a great update. I like it very much. And now back to the real video. All right, here's an example from my upcoming adventure, the lovely Jade Necropolis. And here we have a simple location, the shallow cave. This is outside the Necropolis proper. And there is a small block of read-aloud text. I try to keep mine under 30 words if I can, because I think it should be short. No one wants to be bored listening to a bunch of talk. But as you can see, it is a bit structured. There's stuff that is bolded and underlined, so the GM knows at the table what they're going to have to care about and what is provided more information at the bottom. But again, I'm giving the GM something to say right off the cuff. They don't need to read and parse and then figure out what to say and then say it. I'm giving them what to say, so they and the players can immediately move into interacting with the scene. So if the players say, we want to go to the shallow cave, the GM can then very easily turn the page and say, okay, you see a rocky cave. It extends into a dusty hillside. There's some crushed bones carpeting the floor. There's 2 hyenas lying in the back, and they're nursing their cubs. And you see a bloody human head in between them. What do you do? And that way, all of the information that should be presented up front is. The GM doesn't have to do any extra work. They can just start reading it. And again, I didn't read it verbatim. I was just calling out what seems to be important in the sequence that it was presented in the text. So it doesn't take away my ability as a GM to give it my flavor and my flair or whatever it may be, to give pauses and be dramatic or do funny voices. But what it does is it tells me what I need to focus on, and it gives me an outline, or it just gives me the literal thing. I can just read it verbatim if I need to. So I can do a little bit less work up front. I'm presenting the scene. I'm making sure that the GM isn't going to leave anything out because I've called out everything that's important. And then when the players start to interact and explore with the scene, then we can jump down into the bullet points. And I, the GM, can say, oh, you care about the hyenas. Well, the hyenas they're awake. Oh, yeah, they can see you. They're hungry. They're starting to growl. They're interacting. Oh, that head? Oh, yeah, pick it up. Oh, it's a woman's head. It has dark hair. Oh, I'm sorry. You wanted to cast Talk with Dead? Oh, sure. This woman, her eyes open. Her name is Talissa, and she explains that she was on her way to the Jade Palace to explore its many shrines. We can interact with that. So I think my takeaway from my thoughts and exploration of read-aloud text is that there are some extremes, and people have extreme feelings about that. You can have tons of text, which is not structured, which gives the GM work to parse all the text, figure out what's important or not, create basically bullet points in their head, figure out what to say first, what to say second, what is important, what is not important, which I think is more burden on the GM. It's giving them work to do. I'm sure a lot of the times folks are sitting with their text before the game with a highlighter, looking for what's important, trying to figure out before they run their game, which is not fun. That's more work. Versus swinging the other way to highly structured text, which has lots of bullets and bolding and underline, but that doesn't tie it together in a narrative way. So once again, the GM needs to read all that structured text, figure out what's important, what isn't, what to present, and how to present it. And where I've landed with my last example here of how I write my adventure text is to provide a very small amount of read-aloud text, which structures what's important and what's not, and then allows everyone to proceed and interact without trying to give the GM extra information or extra work at the table or extra work away from the table, prepping for the adventure. I'm trying very hard to give you guys adventure text that you can just sit down and run without having seen it, without having prepped as much as possible. So that's the information that I've been thinking about in developing my style. And obviously there's no right answer here. There's no one true way. You may like a huge amount of text. You may like having a lot of great prose that presents the information. You may like highly structured text that doesn't have any of that, where you can just look through for things that you find important or interesting. Or you could find a middle way, sort of like mine. But I think it's important to understand what your options are and why people feel the way they feel about those different options. And it's always important to make a choice that is conscious and informed. So when you sit down to do your writing, plan your adventure, think about what your options are for read-aloud text or non-read-aloud text, and make the choice that you feel is right for you, for your adventure, for your style of play. I think that's all that's really important. I think you'll do a great job if you think it through and work hard. So that's all my advice for right now for read-aloud text. So good luck out there.